All right. Welcome to episode 4 of Start Good Trouble. My name is Mark Iafrate, and today I'm talking with Bobby Pinero, the co-founder and CEO of Equals. If you're not familiar, Equals is the next generation of spreadsheet that's directly connected to your data, providing the flexibility of a spreadsheet paired with the BI grade dashboards that are as quick and easy to create as a doc. And before Equals, he was actually the Senior Director of Finance and Analytics here at Intercom from 2013 to 2021, where he helped scale Intercom from 20 employees and less than $1 million in ARR to over 600 employees and over 150 million in ARR. So Bobby, welcome, and thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Mark, for having me. Delighted to be back with the Intercom crew.
Yeah, love it. It's really excited. We have so many great things to unpack. Obviously, for context for folks, the team at Equals recently released a stellar, very comprehensive guide to SaaS metrics, which I'm going to add is totally free. It's ungated. We're going to be linking to that here. We're going to be sharing it out with folks, but definitely check it out. And we're going to spend a lot of our time today focused on that. But before we dive into the world of SaaS metrics, Bobby, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and what inspired the creation of Equals?
For sure. Yeah. The best way to describe me is I'm an analyst at heart. So I've been in finance and analytics, started Equals about 4 years ago now. But before starting Equals, I spent 12 years as an analyst myself. I was obviously at Intercom leading finance there for 8 years. But before that was a finance analyst for many years. And started Equals from a frustration with just every other tool out there for us analysts. I was the thesis behind Equals is not particularly groundbreaking, but it is. I think the way that we've executed it has been pretty fundamentally different than the way that most otherwise would. The whole founding thesis behind Equals was that the spreadsheet's actually right. The spreadsheet's the best way to do analysis. The spreadsheet's the place where most people want to work with data, and so. Started the company on that thesis. It was born from all of the different challenges that I had in the Intercom days. It was born from trying to use and force fit every BI tool or these out-of-the-box reporting solutions that try to kind of tell you how to report on your business when every business is unique and different. And we'll talk about this later, requires a different set of metrics to run it. And so it was from being on the ground and working with data and being in the role in which we sell to now that I got the kind of experience to then start Equals.
Yeah, that's such a common founder story of really truly experiencing a problem and just deciding that you're going to be the one to solve it. But I think it's a really interesting kind of caveat that instead of saying we're going to completely turn this on its head, no more spreadsheets for doing something different, the idea that it's starting with that same fundamental type of product, but then layering in all these other kind of improvements and enhancements that just hasn't really been iterated on for a really long time.
Yeah. I mean, I remember when we started Equals, we spent, and this was really important to our kind of product thesis, we spent the first 2 years of the company just telling the team, we're not changing anything about the spreadsheet. The whole point of Equals is that it works exactly like Excel and Google Sheets with a couple superpowers, if you will. And so the reason we were able to build and ship the scale of product that we were in such a quick amount of time is that we actually didn't. Formulas don't work differently. Pivot tables don't work differently. Charts don't work differently. The way that you interact, tabs work the exact same way. The whole thing is designed to be a spreadsheet at its nature. And so that's been kind of a core thesis behind the company from day one.
Yeah, and kind of diving a bit more into that kind of like product building journey. On Start Good Trouble, we've talked a lot about the persistent challenge early stage founders face trying to find product market fit, which can be especially difficult with horizontal products. So can you talk a bit about how you and the Equals team navigated that challenge?
Yeah. So when we started the company, when I was out fundraising for Equals back when we were doing our seed, we'd written a few lines of code, but we obviously didn't have a product that people could use. I remember this being a topic that investors and angels and different folks would tell us, it'd say, hey, awesome idea. We think you're the team to do it, but like, we're warning you, building a horizontal product and taking a horizontal product to market is really hard. And I'm sitting there like, yeah, but you know, Equals is different. We're gonna build the thing. We're gonna connect it to all your data sources, and people will just know what to do with it, of course. And so that's the path we took. And you know, building the product is hard. It's a behemoth of a product. But the thing that's probably been the most surprising for me has been how hard it's been to take Equals to market. And so what does it mean to be a horizontal product? That's kind of like the first thing that I had to wrap my head around, which, you know, again, in the beginnings of Equals, I didn't really fully grok that. When somebody says horizontal product, what they mean is it can be used by many different people in many different ways. And so Equals is about as horizontal a product as it gets. In, you know, when we first launched Equals, we talked about ourselves as the next generation spreadsheet. It's a spreadsheet connected to your data. And so when you say that to the world, it means a million different things to a million different people. A next generation spreadsheet connected to data can be used by a finance person. It can be used by a marketing person. It can be used by a salesperson. It can be used by a product person. And it can be used by a wide variety of different types of companies. And so that's what ended up happening for us when we first launched. I would end up on calls with a head of finance at a Series A company. I'd be like, yes, awesome. They're like me. I can sell to them. And then I'd end up on a call with a digital marketer or, you know, a SCM person at a marketing agency. Oh, I kind of know that job. Then I'd end up on a call with a product person. Then I'd end up on a call with, you know, to give you just a wide, the spectrum here. I'd end up on a call with like a DJ at a radio station, and they'd be like, I have this spreadsheet that I use to like manage playlist, and can you automate it for me? And I'm like, I don't know, maybe. Principals at school districts, managers at like veterinary clinics, just such a wide range of different people. And when you're talking to such a wide range of individuals that can use your product, it becomes really, really hard to figure out how to repeatably build a marketing motion. So when we launch things, the next features that we launched, how do we talk about them? Are we talking about them to a finance person? Are we talking to them are we talking to a marketing person? Are we talking to the DJ at a radio station? Probably not, but you know, hard to build a repeatable marketing motion, hard to build a repeatable sales motion. I can close a lot of these deals, but when I onboard a rep, how do I teach them to sell a deal to such a wide range of different people? Hard to build onboarding flows because you're onboarding people to such different things. Hard to know what features to build. And so it became this like matrix of really kind of, it was like almost like an infinite Rubik's Cube of trying to figure out who are we building for, at what stage, what type of company, what's the buyer. And so it really took us, you know, frankly, the better part of a year of like just having all these conversations. We had to go through it. It was, you know, part of our process until we realized that we just couldn't, that there wasn't going to scale. It wasn't going to work for us to try to close and sell to so many different people. Mm-hmm. And so we had to go through this process of then narrowing down and saying, you know, what are the use cases that we want to win at? Who are the people that we want to sell to? For those people, do we have something that's, you know, 10 times better than any other solution in market? Okay, we've identified a few people and a few use cases that we think are particularly that we can win in. Okay, then we need to change our marketing. We need to change our onboarding flows. We need to think about our positioning. How do we make sure pricing aligns to that? How do we build onboarding flows for that? What are the next set of features that we create for those people and those use cases? And that's when we really started to see the business get to a different level of scale and a different level of repeatability.
Yeah, no, that's also insightful. And it's echoed some similar journeys I've heard about and talk with people about, which is needing to almost do that exploration first and to get your hands very dirty. And then it's this exercise of focusing. And that can be very hard advice for some founders, especially when you're trying to chase that kind of early traction. But and the exercise of how you evaluate the best markets to go into is going to change. But there is this imperative to say, we are going to focus on these and put the energy and effort behind it, because as you know, at an early stage startup, time, energy, resources are absolutely not limitless. And you have to be thinking about where can we make the biggest growth and the biggest penetration in those markets the quickest.
Yeah. And the thing I'd add to this is, I think that's all spot on, but I think the thing that worked for us, and I think it's really important for founders to hear this, is I got a lot of pushback in the beginning of Equals, like I said, asking me, hey, who is this for? What's a use case? Trying to get us to kind of prematurely define that. And we had to start horizontal. We had to go really broad. We ended up in use cases that I think we maybe could have predicted, but it was the product, it was the nature of going horizontal that actually enabled us to figure out which use cases worked for us. I think if we'd gone the other way around and tried to start really narrow, I don't know that we would have gotten that right, and it would have been a much harder process, or maybe harder, to then go and find which use cases would have worked.
Yeah, fantastic advice. So I want to shift a bit into the kind of the more core metrics discussion now. And the question I want to kind of start off with that is, why is having a deep understanding of key metrics so crucial in the SaaS world, and what makes it so complex?
Yeah. So I think of metrics in a few different ways. I think metrics as, there's a kind of like tried and true analogy, which is like, it's the instrumentation, it's how you fly the plane, it's the things that you look at that are giving you signal for where you are and, how to run the business. I also think of it as, to put it in more kind of like engineering terms, I think of it as like the diff in your business. So, you as a founder are constantly trying different things, and the pace at which you try things is really, there's a lot of folks that talk about speed as the lifeblood of a startup, and you can try so many different things. The pace at which you try things is the directly correlated with how successful you are going to be as a startup. And for me, metrics are basically the diff in all those things, all the things that you try. It's how you see whether or not the things that you are trying are moving the needle in the business. Why are they particularly important for SaaS companies? And why are they so complex? Well, SaaS is just a bit of a different beast in terms of how you measure the business. So if you are a car dealership, for example, I think we actually give this example in the SaaS metrics guide. If you're starting a car dealership, you're going to get pretty quick feedback as to whether or not your business is viable. You're going to buy a car, you're going to create a lot, or buy a set of cars, you're going to create a lot, you're going to hire a few employees, and then you're going to start selling them, and you're going to know whether or not pretty immediately you're selling those cars at a profitable rate. Well, SaaS is different, because SaaS, you start a company and you start acquiring customers, but you don't become profitable on those customers for quite some time. And you have to triangulate whether or not you think you're going to be profitable on them and over what time period you think you are going to be profitable on them. And so in the guide, we talk about this as the triangle of despair that comes from my first manager. When I first worked at a SaaS company, he used to call it the triangle of death. And I was like, oh, we'll rebrand it a little bit. It's the triangle of despair. But that triangle of despair is, so in a SaaS company, you'll spend a decent amount of money to acquire a customer, and then that customer pays you back, and you're betting that customer is going to stay with you for many, many months, if not many, many years. And those payments then get you back to profitability for what it costs you to acquire that customer. So now we're talking lifetime value and cost of acquiring a customer. But you've got to then model out how quickly you're going to get paid back on those customers. And that's the whole value of your company. The whole basis of how your company is valued is how quickly you're going to get paid back on a customer and how profitable over the lifetime of that customer you're going to be. And so in the beginning, in the early days of a startup, it's hard to figure this out. You're like having to, you don't have enough data to know whether or not a customer is going to stay with you for a long period of time. It's hard to understand exactly what it costs you to acquire customers. So you're trying to triangulate this in a bunch of different ways. And that's what makes it particularly complex for SaaS companies relative to, any other business.
Yeah. So many great insights in there, and kind of leads me into my next question, which what do you see, or from your conversations, what are some of the common mistakes that companies or founders make when they're evaluating metrics or even operationalizing their metrics?
Yeah. Well, first thing, there's a bunch of different metrics in SaaS, right? Like we can rattle off, you can start talking about net revenue retention, gross retention, lifetime value, CAC, payback. Like there's a bunch of different metrics. I think one of the most common mistakes I see folks make is they'll take all the metrics that, they'll read a blog post. It's like, here are the 20 metrics that you need to measure to understand the efficacy of your SaaS business. And they'll apply it kind of blindly to their company. And the things that it's really important when you're measuring a SaaS business, to understand exactly what it is, how all these metrics kind of feed together to tell the story of your business, and then tailor them specifically to what type of business you are and how your business works and how it runs. And so to give you an example, this is a really simple example, but if you're a business like Intercom was in the early days, so you're a PLG led company, you do self-serve, you sell contracts on a month-to-month basis, your ACVs or your monthly payment on average is anywhere between $50 and $100, and you're a volume play. Well, that's a bottoms up self-serve PLG motion. The things that are going to become really important to you are things like net revenue retention, LTV, CAC, because you're doing this at like such a scale that you have data to be able to calculate those things. And if you move up the funnel, then you start looking at conversion rates through a funnel, and you can measure your business in that way. But if you're a SaaS company that's enterprise focused, all of a sudden, like LTV and CAC, like they're just a lot less important because you almost like can't calculate them. If you're closing like 1 or 2 deals every 3 months, and those deals are multi-million-dollar deals, you kind of know, like, you don't have to have these like big complex net revenue retention models. You don't have to have these LTV to CAC models. You also need completely different funnel metrics. You're looking now at like pipeline and opportunities created and activities and things like that, as opposed to self-serve type metrics. So the first thing is like really tailoring the types of metrics that you're looking at to the way that your business works and the type of SaaS business that you have. And then the second thing I'd say is one of the other common mistakes I see people make is isolating a metric and making that the end all be all. So it is true that LTV to CAC is really important. It's also true that net revenue retention is really important. And you talk to founders, you talk to investors, and they'll tell you, like, the holy grail of SaaS is having a net revenue retention of 120%. And that's great. That makes sense. But I see people over-index on that and take that almost like too literally, where it's possible that a business can grow faster at a net revenue retention of 100% relative to a business that has 110% net revenue retention. And it's just based on the actual sheer dollars. It's also possible, we give this example in the SaaS guide, it's possible to grow a business that has a 3x LTV to CAC can be way more valuable than a business that has a 5x LTV to CAC. And that's because if your payback period is much faster, actually having an LTV to CAC of 3x could be better. If you're getting money back faster and then able to reinvest that back in the business, you might actually prefer that over having a 5x LTV to CAC. And so I see people over-index on one specific metric and kind of lose the forest for the trees in terms of how their business actually works. And so you really need to kind of think about things holistically and think about, that's why we wrote the guide. We wrote it so that people can, from end to end, see how a SaaS business works, understand the importance of each metric, and then be able to piece that together for their whole business, for their whole company, and then figure out which of these metrics matter and help them triangulate.
Yeah, that's a great advice again, and like a perfect segue, because we've talked a bit about kind of storytelling with metrics, and you've emphasized the importance of storytelling when it comes to like the data and the metrics within your business. How can companies better integrate storytelling into, like, by leveraging their metrics, or do you have any advice on for founders doing so, whether it's telling themselves like a clear, accurate story, or telling their employees or business units or board members or investors?
Yeah. The advice it's kind of an art, figuring out how to storytell, but then also how to incorporate metrics in storytelling. And I think this is actually what sets apart like a great analyst. I remember when I hired analysts at Intercom, this was something that I always tried to either look for in the recruiting process or coach them when they were at the company. So there's a part of the process of like putting together the story for any business. You're obviously in like an exploratory phase, and like if you're an analyst, you're sitting down to figure out what's going on in a particular portion of your business. You're in an exploratory phase. You're looking at different metrics. You're like pulling things together. Before you then kind of put together your presentation that you take to the exec team or you take to your stakeholder, the thing that I always encourage people to do is to sit down and say, okay, what is the actual, you've pulled all the different metrics. You've kind of triangulated in your head the things that are important, but actually sit down and write a story for what's happening before you put together the deck. And this will translate over to fundraising. This translates over to board meetings. This translates over to running exec meetings. But as an analyst, sit down and actually figure out what is the story that you want to tell. What's the story, the really simplified, condensed version of the thing that matters the most and the thing that's actually happening in the business. And then you take all the metrics that you've created. You maybe have looked at everything. Your job as an analyst is to turn over every stone. But your job in presenting that is not to show that you've turned over every stone. It's to figure out what the story is and then use the metrics that support that story in the story. And so you tell the story of it. And then if anybody asks you any questions later, and you've already turned over every stone, so you can answer those questions. And so for an analyst, that's my advice, but that applies also for founders. If you're at fundraising, it's the same thing with metrics. You don't just pull the catalog of SaaS metrics that every company looks at and just throw them in the deck so that the investor can kind of check the boxes for all the things. You figure out what the story is. You figure out how your business actually works, the things that are most important to it, and you put the metrics that support that. And then in the back of your head, you've done the work to turn over every stone, to look at everything so that exactly you can dig into any portion of the business. But it always starts with the story. It starts with how do things work? What's your understanding of how things work? And then you go to the metrics.
Yeah, I love that. And it's funny because I feel like, I work in marketing and I've worked in a number of different roles, but at the end of the day, I think a lot of what different people do in different parts of businesses, especially in the SaaS world, is storytelling, whether it's product marketing and telling a story, whether it's a salesperson giving a pitch or why something is going to help another company's product, board meeting. It's all about getting to the what is the out, like, what are we actually trying to do here? What is the value that we're trying to drive? And then telling that story and then going back into the data, the metric. It's not just a single slide with your NRR, right? It's literally, why does this matter? And why is this important? Or why do we have to fix this? Or why are we allocating resources towards it or against it?
Well said.
Yeah. I love that. Shifting a tiny bit, I would love to hear just some advice that you might give founders and early stage companies when it comes to just building and marketing their products and that doesn't have to be through the lens of metrics. It can be, but it's just something that I've heard a lot of you and the folks at Equals talking about.
Yeah. I'll share one of the best pieces of advice that was given to me. I'm just going to pass it along. And it's from our beloved Des Trainer, one of the co-founders of Intercom. So when we started Equals, and this was before we'd even raised the seed. I pinged Des and I'm like, hey, Des, we'd love to have you on board as an angel. And he's like, absolutely, I'm in, one condition. Like, okay, what's the condition? He's like, you need to write a blog post every week for the first year if I'm going to invest. And I was like, okay, all right, I'm in, I'll do it. And Des gave me his explanation as to why that was important. Obviously, it was a really important thing for Intercom. But I'll tell you why it actually mattered to me. I didn't understand this at the time when Des told me. The simple act of writing for me was, it did a few things for me. One is it helped me actually practice being out in the world. And as a first-time founder, it's a scary thing. It's scary to like put yourself out into the world and share your ideas with the world. But that's what starting a company is. And starting a company is very literally having an idea, putting it out into the world, wanting people to use it, pay for it, give you feedback on it. You're going to lose deals on it. You're going to get a lot of rejection. That's the whole process of doing that. And so writing was a microcosm for that. And it was like a great way for me to practice telling our story to the world and facing that fear, frankly. It was like practicing just being out in the world. It also helped me really kind of codify my thinking on a lot of different topics. It's a simple act of writing where you sit down to, I would sit and write for a day and absolute garbage. And then it wasn't until like 2 days later that the whole thing made sense. And that in and of itself also made it a lot clearer, like what Equals is, who it's for, why it matters. And then it had the kind of secondary benefit of actually just being a lead source for us. So a big part of the spirit behind which I wrote was, can I create content that I wish I myself had 10 years ago when I was in the seat at Intercom? What do I wish I had known? What do I wish had existed? And let me just write blog posts that are basically just letters to myself 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. And that then had this knock-on effect of like resonating with people. And I think probably like the first 20 customers we closed at Equals came from those blog posts. And so it just had this kind of knock-on effect of like really actually bringing us people.
Yeah. I love that so much. And it's advice that's been given to me, and it's something that I've been trying to be better at. And I know a lot of people that I've talked to in Start Good Trouble and these other kind of just conversations casually, it's writing is this amazing forcing function. And at least before I ever started to do it, you keep hearing people say it's a good thing and it'll help and it'll do this and that. But until you sit down and do it, you don't realize like how helpful it can really be in your day-to-day, or how you think about things, how you talk about your product or market it. There's something about that process that kind of triggers that. And I like that you also touched on that the kind of the inadvertent marketing component, because I'm sure when you were doing that, obviously content and thought leadership was important, but now like genuine true thought leadership from people putting real valuable content out in the world is paramount for a good marketing strategy. And having that come from somebody from a very genuine way, being thoughtful and doing it like you did, which was writing letters to yourselves that you wish you had known 10 years ago and trying to just get valuable insights into the world, I think is something that people genuinely gravitate towards. And not only is it key now, but it's a win-win-win for like kind of everybody involved doing it if you're being truly thoughtful and genuine and consistent with that whole process.
Yeah. I mean, you hit on a few really important things there. One is like consistency. When I pass this advice on now to other founders, that's the number one thing I tell them is like, you just got to stay consistent. And some weeks you're going to absolutely hate it, or if you're committing to like write on LinkedIn, which is a whole different beast.
Yep.
But you got to stay consistent. You just got to do it, and you got to force yourself to do it. And I remember Des telling me he himself in the early Intercom days when he was writing on the blog, he was like, he just knew the newsletter was going out every Wednesday at a certain time, and he had a blog post in there, and
Yep.
it was like, sometimes the night before he'd be writing the thing, but like you had to get it done. And then I think you're hitting on something else, which is really important, which I think has been one of the keys on how Equals has stood out is authenticity. And it's, even more important now with, so many folks, AI, SEO content, this, AI blog post, It's like, for me, the more that I feel excited about a topic and excited about the thing that I'm sharing and excited about and it's coming from a place of like genuine, this is something that I felt and I cared about. And those posts always do better.
Yeah.
And so the more that folks can kind of just come from a really authentic, what do I want, as opposed to what do I think everybody else wants to hear? That's a winning strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's I can't remember who had the quote, but it's this idea that if you're speaking to your audience, which you should be as a founder, like it'll naturally help you find your tribe. If you do it genuinely, like people will start to gravitate towards you. It's actually one of the positives of these different algorithms that we have, is that if people find it interesting and they're engaging in it, it's going to be fed to more people in similar ways. And I think, again, like from a purely like marketing tactic, that's a very good thing. But it's hard to overstate how valuable that is. And I think anybody can experience this where, I know I've like sat down and thought of like a really thoughtful like LinkedIn post or something that like an article I want to post, and then it like kind of falls flat. And then the one where I just like sit down and bang something out in 5 seconds, but it's like just genuine, some small thing, and it just like takes off because and so you never know sometimes what it is going to be that gets people excited. So the consistency of doing it and the genuineness of doing it, I think, is one of those things that will naturally help you find like your voice, your group, and to like gain that traction that you really are trying to find.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And to this day, like I still don't know, like you said, I'll spend hours writing a post or a long time writing a post, and I'm like, oh wow, this is great, and flops. And then I'll spend 10 minutes writing a post, and I'm like, whoa, that thing, like, where did that go? And you just don't know. So sometimes you just got to keep doing it. And then somebody once told me, this is the most obvious thing, but it's like, well, if it doesn't do well, nobody sees it. It's like, yeah, so don't worry about it.
Yep. Nobody really cares in like the best way when you write something that flops.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I know we're getting kind of close to time, but I would love to hear any final thoughts or lessons learned from your journey or advice from Equals that you'd love to just share with folks watching or listening.
Well, part of it's on this topic. Like, I think I get a lot of joy out of Equals when I see it as a vehicle for helping other people, people that are in my seat, or just, helping analysts and helping them kind of like create really cool analyses. Like I remember that feeling of like being on the chase of like, like being on the scent of, I've got like a data set, I've got a question that I want to answer, and I want to like go do it, and kind of like figuring it out. And I remember how fun that was, and to build a tool that allows people to do that in a faster, more efficient, more delightful way, that brings me a lot of joy. And so I have found the most amount of joy and fulfillment in this company and in this job when I'm focused on that. When I'm focused on how do I inspire people? How do I bring people joy? How do I, help them do their work? And so I spent a lot of time thinking about that, as opposed to, I'm obviously thinking about how do we build as big a business as we possibly can? How do we, all that stuff, all the commercial stuff. But for me, the intention of like, how do I help people and how do I inspire them and create that joy for them? That to me, like that lights me up, as opposed to how do I build a multi-billion-dollar company? Like that's exciting too, but it's like, it's a different energy to it. And the more that I approach my work with how do I help people and create that joy for them, I find that the world responds to it differently than if it's like, oh, we need to build like a big business and, close big contracts and da 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 da. And so that's just my experience, but I really encourage founders to kind of find the thing that gets them really energized and really excited, and to approach their work in kind of that same fashion. Like, how do I help people? How do I, make people like absolute best at their job, and the rest will kind of take care of itself.
Yeah, absolutely love to hear that. Great note to end on. And Bobby, again, thank you for your time. This has been so insightful. Appreciate your time, your energy, your insights. If somebody wanted to find you or follow you online or Equals, where could they do that?
For sure. Yeah. So equals.com is where they can find anything about Equals. We've got, and then you can find me on Twitter or X, at Bobby Pinero. And then on LinkedIn, just I think also just / Bobby Pinero. I publish a lot on both platforms, both our writing and then all the updates about Equals there too. So follow along.
Awesome. Thank you, Bobby. And like I said, we'll be sharing out, there'll be links to all these things. We'll have to share a link to the guide, but absolutely check it out. I spent way too long diving into it, I feel like, and really, really great stuff in there. Super insightful. Again, Bobby, thank you so much. Hope you have a great rest of your day, and thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Mark. This was really fun.
Cheers.